Welcome, my name is Karen Dunsquire and I am the MD of this company here, which is called Elation. You're all here today to cover a conversion masterclass which should give you the tips and techniques that you need to maximise your conversion rate when you're dealing with your clients. Before we move on to the exact content of today, I just want to give you a bit of a context around what these workshops are about, what I'm hoping to achieve, and a little bit about my background and my business. So, I started Elation in March 2009. The intention of the business was to work with businesses small and medium size and to help them reach their growth aspirations. I wanted to create a process and a methodology that would allow organisations to quickly understand what their areas for development were, to have the tools to put those improvements in place and have a really sound sales operation. So I devised this methodology, which is called the 3 pillars of successful selling, which is why our workshop today is called the secrets of successful selling. The idea of the tool is that it gives you, as salespeople or business owners, easy access to a model that will tell you what your business needs to do to be more successful. And the 3 pillars operate under the basic premise that in order to have real strength in your sales operation, you need to have 3 key things in place. You need to have a very strong sales activity pillar. This pillar is where we talk about the individual communications that your customer sees, and we look at the quality, and we look at the quantity, and we look to understand whether they are effective enough to drive decision in your business. The second pillar is around sales process. Sales process is where we look at the planning and the strategy that you have in place that drives customers through your organisation. That covers off your lead generation practices, your lead nurturing practices, your account management practices, and make sure that there's process in place around them to get you the right outcomes. And then the third pillar is the sales management pillar. And that pillar is about how we track and measure success and how we lead our teams to make sure that we're driving the appropriate amount of activity through the business. If an organisation has strength in all 3 of those pillars, then it'd be a high-performing sales operation. And that's the key to the secrets of successful selling, is to be strong in each 3 of those areas. You cannot have complete success without consistency across all of the 3 pillars that are holding up your sales operations and giving it strength. So the workshops today and throughout the afternoon are all based on giving you some education around those 3 pillars. Today, in this session, we're focusing on sales activity, and there's 2 sessions later on today that will focus on sales process and sales management. And we'll give you just some little tips and nuggets of how you can get real strength in those pillars. So let's move on to your conversion masterclass. We're talking today about what I call your process for success. This is a 4-step process that I have devised when working with my customers and clients that will allow you to control your interaction with your prospects in such a way that you will maximise their decisions to buy with you. The intention behind this is that we can maximise what we are achieving by being very structured in what we're looking to say. It doesn't matter whether you're doing a follow-up to an email marketing campaign, you're attending a new business meeting, you're doing an account management phone call, or you're doing a face-to-face account management review. If you lead that interaction according to the 4 steps I'm going to share with you, you'll get maximum conversion rate. So let's look at this. The first thing I want you to consider is that the best way to control the outcomes you get with your clients is to be absolutely clear in the way you communicate with them. Sales interactions are just like any other form of communication. They have to be structured in an appropriate way in order that the message gets across effectively. If you think about written communications, if I bought you a book and I let you read chapter 16, then chapter 1, and then chapter 9, would the story of the book be clear to you? No, it wouldn't. That's nothing to do with the quality of the writing. It's to do with the fact you didn't read it in the right order, so it didn't have the right impact. If you went to the theatre and you saw a piece of verbal communication in the form of a play, and you watched Act 3 and then Act 1 and then Act 2, that message of that play would not come across accurately to you. Your sales communications are exactly like any other form of language. They have to be structured appropriately in order that the message comes through clearly. Let me give you an example of what that means in the real world. If I say to you, quite small is my house, what am I saying? My house is quite small. Thank you, gentleman in the front. Now, because that was a really short sentence, all the words in it were one syllable long, and you all speak English, you were able to decode that message, yeah? It's quite easy to work out, even though I made a couple of mistakes. Okay, if I said to you, of feasible are the communications without structured doubtmost form, what am I saying then? Got lots of very confused looking faces. What I said was, structured calls are without doubt the most feasible form of communication. But it was a long sentence, it had lots of words with many syllables in it. Even though you understood every word in that sentence, because they weren't put together in the right order, you couldn't decode that message. Now the meaning behind that is incredibly powerful. When you go to a sales meeting, or you make a sales call, or you touch base with a client to get feedback from them, and you do, I'll build a bit of rapport, I'll tell them a bit about what's going on here, I'll ask them a couple of questions and I'll try and close the sale, but they're not ready yet, so we'll go back, we'll ask a few more questions, do a bit more telling them about how amazing we are, build a little bit of rapport because I don't think we're getting on well enough, so we'll throw in some chat about the dogs and the cats and the family, then we'll do some more questioning, and we're going all over the place. And we finish the phone call, or the face-to-face meeting, and we didn't get out of it quite what we were hoping to get out of it. That doesn't mean that each individual question that you asked wasn't fantastic quality. And each individual statement that you made wasn't a really good selling point for your business. It means that you went around the houses and changed the structure so significantly that what they came away with was the same feeling that you came away with when I used that really long muddled up sentence, which is, I got all the words in that, but I don't really know what the message was. Yeah? So if you come away from today with nothing else, the most important thing about your sales interactions is that they have absolute clarity, that there is a structure, that you do not confuse your prospect by throwing different messages in different orders and make them lose the intention of the interaction. Does that all make sense? Can you all feel and remember sales instances where you've been that person who's gone around the houses, no idea? You're not sure. Okay. Let's talk about the 4 stages that I'm going to recommend that you use to maximize the quality of your interactions. The stages of the sale. There's 4 of them. There's 4 of them because 4 is an easier number to remember than 7 or 12 or 18. I like to keep it as simple as possible and give you the easiest opportunity to actually maximize the effectiveness. So stage 1 is impress. This is where the opening statement that we use in our sales interactions is designed in order to make sure that the customer sees an immediate value and benefit to speaking with you. Stage 2 is converse. This is where we're drawing out information from our clients, we're opening up a discussion, we're getting our clients to talk about themselves and share information with you. Stage 2 is advise. You might have seen this referred to in other schools of selling as the pitching section or the presentation section or the selling section. I very specifically avoid that language because what I want you to do is position yourself as expert advisors to your clients. Someone who gives recommendations and advice based on your knowledge that they are going to be willing to accept and take. And then the final stage is request. Now let's think a little bit about these stages. For me, it's absolutely essential that they happen in this order and in no other order. Why do you think it is massively important that before we do any talking to our clients about what we do and what we think they should be buying from us, that we first converse and get them to talk about themselves? What's the value of that? Why is that important? Yeah? Absolutely. So find their problem. This is the key thing. Now, many people in the world of selling, salespeople, sales managers, sales directors alike, come from a school of thought that says in order to best get new customers, we must tell people how great we are. We must throw product information at them, throw USPs at them, overinflate our credibility and blow them away with how fantastic we are. The reality is that the way we actually win business is by achieving 2 things. One of them is to solve their problem. Solve a specific problem that that individual has that no one else is solving. And the second one is to create a future value or benefit. Is to present something to them that is going to improve their lives in a way that nobody else is improving it. An enhancement, better value, better quality, better service. Something that they're not seeing already. In order to do that effectively, we have to understand our clients properly. So before we tell, first of all we ask, and we'll look at that in a bit more detail in a minute. So let's go through what these stages need to look like. Stage 1, impress. This is where we are letting our customers know what is in it for them. Why bother engaging in this conversation with me? Why bother being part of this transaction with me? There's a very good way that we can open our interactions with our clients that will ensure we get best value out of them. I do this with a lot of businesses where I work with incredibly capable salespeople. We make this one small tweak to the way that they open and conduct their sales meetings, and the impact is absolutely massive. So these statements are called expectation setting statements. And they tell us about the most high quality way to open a sales interaction to make sure that we're the most likely to get the outcomes that we want. So let me give you an example of what an expectation setting statement would look like for myself. So let's imagine that we've had an inquiry come into the business, we've sent them out a nice little proposal, and now I'm following that up by telephone. I would obviously do a little bit of rapport building, a bit of banter, a bit of small talk, check that they were all right to talk. When we were confident that the activity was going to go ahead, I would then be saying something along the lines of, that's great. So thanks ever so much for taking my call today. What I was hoping to do was just go through a few questions with you, make sure I fully understood your needs and your opinions about the proposal. Then I'll let you know a little bit about how I think that I can help you, and then at the end of the call we'll make a decision together about whether you want to go ahead. Yeah? So that's how I might open at that particular call. Now let me ask you a couple of questions about that. Number one, when you hear that statement, who do you think is in charge of that meeting? Me, yeah. So the person who's opening with that statement is the one that leads that meeting. Now that's incredibly important, because if you want to be the one that comes out with your required outcome, you need to be the one leading the show. You can't have the customer run the interaction to their agenda. So that expectation setting statement gives me control. When you think back about that statement, what do you think, who do you think's needs are most important in that interaction? Theirs, the clients. It's very clear that this interaction is about meeting their needs, understanding what they want, and finding the right solutions for them. Now that is very, very important. Normally when you are in a situation of control and you are in charge of something, you are the most senior person in that interaction. Yeah, so we might be talking about a parent and a child. We might be talking about a teacher and a pupil, a boss and an employee. The person who is in control is normally the most important person in that relationship. When you use a statement like that, you say to your clients, I'm in control, but you're more important. And that's an incredibly good dynamic to be building with your clients. That their needs are the priority for you, them first, you second. So that kind of statement does 4 really important things for you if you craft it properly. It gives you ownership of the meeting. If you don't own control of the interaction, you're not going to get the outcomes that you want. It'll be their outcomes that will be achieved. It sets a purpose for the call. The purpose of this call is that I am going to understand what you need and tell you how I might meet those needs. There's a very clear purpose to what's about to happen next. The third thing is it sets the agenda. Now if we look back to this 4-stage process that we want to be putting in place, I have said in my expectation setting statement, first of all I'm going to ask you some questions. Then I'm going to tell you a little bit about how I can help you, and at the end we're going to make a decision together. I've absolutely preempted the stages that I want to go through by setting that agenda. If you lay out the agenda before the interaction, you are much more likely that it will run to that specific agenda. And the final one there is there's an objective. At the end of the call, we are going to make a decision together about whether you would like to go ahead with that proposal. Everyone knows what we're looking to get out of this. There's a clear objective to it and an outcome for the call. much more likely to achieve your objective if you've laid it out in the early stages. So opening your sales interactions in that way set you up for the highest likelihood to control that agenda and achieve your objectives. So then we move on to the conversing stage. Now, I can't tell you today what questions you need to be asking your clients. That's something that you need to think about in a very structured way. What I would like to recommend for you is two things. Number one, that you always lead with the questioning of the customer before you talk about yourself in any way, shape or form. And secondly, that you plan out your questioning phase. Very experienced salespeople will know through experience exactly what to ask in those sales interactions. But if you are not absolutely certain what is the appropriate information to capture, you need to plan it out. You need to plan out and craft your questioning stage. Now there's three really important reasons that having your conversational stage at the front of your sales interaction is massively important. Number one, as we touched on, we're unearthing need. We have to solve a problem. We can't solve a problem unless we know what the problem is. So we're taking the time to unearth that need. We're also putting the client first. We're saying your needs are the most important, and they will remain the most important to me because I'm looking to serve you. And there is a third reason, which is a lot more subtle than that, and many people don't think about consciously, and that is about the idea of something that is called the expertise dynamic. Now the expertise dynamic happens in every single conversation that we have with anybody, ever. At some point, when you are engaged with another human being, somebody in that conversation will hold the expertise dynamic. They will be the most expert in that subject in that particular space in time. And when you're in the pub chatting with your mates, the expertise dynamic will flow backwards and forwards. You know, if you're a rugby fan, when you're talking about the rugby, you'll hold the dynamic. If you're a football fan, when we're talking about football, you'll hold the dynamic. It will move up and down and around depending on who has the highest level of expertise in a particular subject. When you are dealing with your clients and your prospects, it is incredibly powerful for you if you can hold the expertise dynamic. Because if you have that always in your side, you are going to have the highest likelihood that they will take your recommendations and advice. But there's a really big misconception about this expertise dynamic, and I just want to think about that now. How do we define someone as an expert? If I said John here, my invisible friend, is an expert in IT, what would it be about John that told us he was an expert? What would John have that all the other people didn't have? Yeah, so he would have experience, he would be knowledgeable, and he would know about IT. So the broadly accepted definition of expert is someone who holds all the knowledge. So that's pretty obvious, yeah? The expert in the interaction is the most knowledgeable person in that interaction. Now let's take that to another step. If I am an expert and I hold a high level of knowledge, how do I let you know about that? How do I demonstrate that to you? What do I need to do for you to think that person's got a lot of knowledge? What am I doing to you guys now? Yeah, so I'm speaking to you, I'm talking to you, I'm sharing information with you. So the way that we demonstrate outwardly that we have a good level of knowledge and expertise is by talking. Now here is where, or writing, but you know, communicating outwardly. Here is where the common misconception comes about the expertise dynamic. We believe, almost all of us as human beings, believe that the way that we demonstrate that we are experts is by talking. Now there's another step before that that we normally miss out. How did John, in this instance, with his IT knowledge, how did he gain that knowledge? How did he become? Listening. He gained that knowledge by listening. At some point, before John became an expert, he had to listen and learn that information. We can only learn in one of a selection of ways. We can hear our information, we can read our information. Reading is just listening to our own voice in our heads, so it's the same concept. We have to listen. So very often when we are trying to demonstrate that we are experts, we do a huge amount of talking. Where you really hold the expertise dynamic is by listening. That is how we actually demonstrate that we really know what we're talking about, is by listening. Let me give you an example of how that works in the real world. So imagine I go to the doctor I sit down in the doctor's surgery, and before anyone opens their mouth, she hands me a prescription. Are you going to take those tablets? Some people might. They sound like quite fun. Mostly though, we wouldn't take those tablets, right? If we sat down in the doctor's surgery and she took a good 15 minutes to say, understand your full medical history, understand your family medical history, go into depth about your symptoms, how long you've been experiencing them, and then she gave you a prescription, would you take that? Much more likely to. So the reality is those two prescriptions could have been absolutely identical. But I don't take the first one because she didn't listen, so I don't think she's an expert. I do take the second one because she listened, so I know she's an expert. It's a really, really simple dynamic. It's not the talking that the doctor does that makes you believe that she's an expert, it's the listening. And that's what we so often miss out on. When we're in our sales interactions with our clients, first we listen to gain the knowledge, then we talk to demonstrate the knowledge. That's where we get the expertise dynamic. When we talk first and listen later, we mess that all up. So we sit down, oh great, so Mr. Client, this is what we do, this is what the business does, I'm coming here today to sell you this thing and tell you about this product, it's going to be fantastic. Oh, and PS, tell me a bit about you. What that says is, I'm not really an expert in that subject, the person isn't really interested in me, it was a PS. The agenda is about them. So this conversing stage should be the majority of your sales interaction. I'm first listening, then I'm talking, then I've really got that expertise dynamic. Then, when you get to the advisory stage, where this is where you are telling this customer what they should be buying from you, they are going to believe it. Like the scenario with the GP and their prescriptions, they are much, we know that in scenario number 1, where doctor asks no questions, there are some people who will take those tablets, right? For many and various reasons. But what we also know is that in the second scenario, where the GP asks lots of questions, there are a much bigger pool of people who are likely to take those tablets. So it massively increases the likelihood that your expertise recommendations are going to be accepted and agreed with by your customer if you talk first, if you listen first and then advise later. So this advisory stage is where you are then, based on the knowledge that you have gained of the problems that they have, matching in your products and services, recommending a bespoke, tailor-made solution that meets the needs that they have, that's adding the value to the business. Then it should be quite a simple case of, I fully understand your business and organisation, I've made some expert recommendations, now I'm going to get some commitment from you. Because you trust me, because I've demonstrated I'm an expert by listening first and talking second. There's a couple of important things to think about with this requesting stage. Often, people call this the closing stage. I'm not really a massive fan of that use of language because we only close a sale once. The point where we get the credit card details or we get the purchase order number, that's when we close the sale. Before that, there's a whole load of interactions that happen with our customers, and if we don't make regular requests and commitment from them, we're not going to fast track that sale. The type of request and commitment that you ask of them need to be relevant to where they are in the journey and relevant to what you need from them. So in a very early stage sales interaction, I might just simply be asking, please will you read the email that I'm going to send you? Please will you read the testimonials that are on our website? Please will you take a look at this specific blog or look at these product specifications? Do this online demo. Later on in the sales cycle, I might be asking if they would increase their minimum order value, or I might be asking them to sign the proposal. The request you make is relevant to the stage that you make it in. But making a request every single time does two very important things. Number one, it increases your conversion rate because you're asking for the business. And number two, it shortens your sales cycle. It makes people make quicker decisions because they're being asked for things from you. What happens with customers who are in a dynamic where they're regularly being made requests of is they're much more likely to say yes to you. If I've got a prospect and I've said, please will you read this email, and they read it and it's useful to them, a little bit later on down the line I say, why don't you call one of my clients and have a chat with them on the phone about the quality of my work? And they have that chat and it goes well. And then I say, why don't we do a web demonstration of how that's going to work for you? And they do the web demonstration, and it's useful for them. When I then say, why don't you sign on the bottom of that £10,000 proposal? They're going to go, well, the last 3 times she asked me to do something, it worked out for me. So I trust her, I'm going to sign it. We're establishing a dynamic of trust where I add value with my recommendations and they take them and their life gets better. It's an incredibly powerful dynamic to set up. Now you can apply this 4-stage process to any of your sales interactions, phone calls, account management meetings, even in emails. This structure can be incredibly valuable. Ask a question, make a recommendation, have a call to action at the bottom of it. Constantly moving people as quickly through the sales cycle as you can. Now if any of you want any more information about how this would work, that's a link to a free ebook that talks not only about this sales activity pillar and what you need to have in place to make it really effective, it talks about sales process and sales management as well. There's loads of other sales tools on our website, from templates for how you would run a sales meeting to everything else in between. A few other things that might be of interest to you guys before you disappear off today. I do 1-hour sales reviews with businesses that help them to assess where their areas for development are. Ordinarily they're £250 a session, but today 10 people will get one of those sessions for free. If you pop to the stand that's directly behind me, there's 3 things that my colleagues might be able to do for you. They could register you to get one of these free sales reviews. You could play a very stupid game with a very high likelihood of winning a bottle of champagne. And then they can also take your details if you would like to have copies of these slides so you can refer back to them in the future. So if anyone has any questions, I'm here for the next 5 minutes. I'm very friendly and I love a chat. Come and see me. And if not, pop to the stand, make sure they've got your business card, make sure that they know what you need from them next, and we'll get those emails sent out to you. Meanwhile, have a great rest of your afternoon and thanks for coming. Bye.